The Galactic Council had always underestimated two things about humans: their capacity to endure suffering in silence, and the ferocity of those who loved them. Mira Rowan sat in the observation deck of the Harmony's Edge, staring through the viewport at the swirling nebula beyond. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of synthetic tea, the warmth doing nothing to chase away the cold that had settled into her bones 3 cycles ago. The bruise on her wrist had faded to a sickly yellow-green, carefully hidden beneath the sleeve of her uniform. "I'm fine," she had whispered when Commander Thelos asked about her absence from the previous day's briefing. The Zenthari commander had accepted her words with a curt nod, his scaled features unreadable. Humans were strange creatures to most of the galaxy, emotional, fragile, yet inexplicably resilient. If Mira Rowan said she was fine, then she was fine. But the cubs knew better. Vess had been the first to notice. The young Karvashi pup, barely past his second molt, had an instinct for distress that his elders had long since suppressed in favor of diplomatic protocols. His kind, a species of wolf-like beings covered in silver-gray fur with eyes that gleamed like molten copper, were known throughout the galaxy as peacekeepers and mediators. They were trained from birth to read body language, to sense the subtle shifts in pheromones and micro-expressions that betrayed inner turmoil. When Mira had walked past the recreation area that morning, Vess's ears had flattened against his skull, his nose twitched, catching something wrong in her scent: fear, pain, and the acrid tang of suppressed rage. She had smiled at him. That same tired smile she gave everyone, but her eyes remained empty. Vess had immediately sought out the others. Within an hour, 5 Karvashi cubs had gathered in the lower cargo bay, their usual playful roughhousing replaced by an eerie stillness. Vess stood at the center, his hackles raised as he shared what he had sensed. There was Kara, whose hearing could detect a heartbeat from 3 decks away. Thrin and Mix, twins whose synchronized movements made them nearly impossible to shake in pursuit. And old Joss, old by cub standards, at least who had seen enough of the galaxy to know when someone needed protection, even if they wouldn't ask for it, the human female. Vess growled softly, his voice carrying the peculiar harmonics of his species. Something hurt her. Someone hurt her. Kara's ears perked forward. She spoke to no one about it? Humans hide their pain, Joss rumbled, his amber eyes narrowing. They consider it strength. But we are Karvashi. We know better. The cubs exchanged glances, and in that moment, a silent pact was formed. The galaxy might overlook a human's suffering, might accept a whispered "I'm fine" at face value, but they would not. The investigation began with the subtlety expected of young predators learning to hunt. They listened at doorways, their sensitive ears picking up fragments of conversations. They watched the crew's movements, noting who avoided Mira and who watched her too closely. They accessed security logs through terminals that adults assumed were beyond their understanding. The Karvashi were supposed to be warriors and diplomats, not hackers. But necessity bred innovation. It took 2 days to piece together the truth. Lieutenant Krask, a Bulgarian trader attached to the ship's supply division, had cornered Mira in the cargo bay 3 cycles ago. The Bulgarians were a reptilian species, known for their aggressive business practices. But assault was supposed to be beneath them. The security footage had been conveniently corrupted but not thoroughly enough to fool Vess's determination. A partially recovered audio file revealed Mira's voice saying, "No," repeatedly, followed by Krask's hissing laughter. When she had finally broken free and reported to her supervisor, she had been told to not make trouble. The ship needed its supply lines, and Krask had connections. It would be easier for everyone if she simply moved past it. So Mira had whispered, "I'm fine," and retreated into herself, carrying her violation in silence. The cubs did not accept this. On the 3rd day, Krask found himself surrounded in the lower maintenance corridor. He had been heading to his quarters when shadows peeled away from the walls 5 young Karvashi, their eyes glowing in the dim light, their lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. "What is this?" Krask hissed, his forked tongue flickering nervously. "Cubs should be supervised." "You hurt Mira Rowan," Vess stated, stepping forward. His voice carried none of the playfulness typical of his age. "You hurt her, and you made her afraid to speak." Krask's scales rippled with what might have been amusement or fear. The human? She's fine. She said so herself. Now move, pups, before I report you for— He didn't finish the sentence. Kara's howl echoed through the corridor, a sound pitched specifically to trigger every alarm on the ship, while simultaneously causing Krask's sensitive inner ear membranes to spasm with pain. As he stumbled, clutching his head, the twins moved with practiced precision, herding him toward the central atrium where the entire crew was now gathering, drawn by the alarm. Vess placed himself directly in Krask's path, small but immovable. You will tell them what you did. You will confess. Or we will make sure everyone knows what you are. I am a licensed trade official. You are children. Krask spat. We are Karvashi. Joss said quietly, emerging from the shadows behind him. We protect the pack. Mira Rowan is pack. By the time the senior officers arrived, Krask was surrounded by every off-duty crew member on the ship. The Cubs had positioned him perfectly beneath the atrium's central light, where he could be seen by all. Vess sat at attention, his posture formal despite his youth, and began to recite exactly what they had discovered: the corrupted files, the audio fragment, the supervisor who had silenced Mira. Commander Thelos listened with growing fury, his scales darkening to nearly black. Beside him, Captain Saris, a human herself, had gone very still in the way humans did before they became dangerous. Mira stood at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in 3 cycles, she wasn't hiding. The Cubs had given her something she thought she'd lost: the right to be heard. Krask was removed from the ship in chains that evening. The supervisor who had dismissed Mira's complaint was demoted and transferred, and new protocols were implemented across the entire fleet. No report of assault would be dismissed. No voice would be silenced. And no one would have to whisper, "I'm fine," when they were breaking inside. That night, Mira found Vess in the observation deck, watching the stars. "Thank you," she said softly, kneeling beside him. The young Karvashi leaned against her, his warmth a comfort against her side. "You are Pack," he said simply. "Pack protects Pack. Even when they say they're fine." Mira wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his soft fur, and for the first time in 3 cycles, she allowed herself to cry, not in silence, not in shame, but in the presence of someone who cared enough to see past her words to her truth. The galaxy might have rules and protocols and diplomatic niceties, but the Cubs had taught them all a more important lesson. Some bonds transcended species, and some hurts demanded justice. No matter how quietly they were born, Mira Rowan was fine now. But she'd never have to pretend to be again.